This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Friday. It's October 6th, 2023. Thank you for joining us here on The Truth Central. We're broadcasting every weekday a podcast, and it's on multiple channels. You can see on our homepage, thetruthcentral.com, the upper right-hand corner, all the different platforms we're on, including Rumble, BitChute, Apple Podcasts, etc., both with video and audio only. So you can see us in many different formats. First story I want to cover today is it looks like Donald Trump is going to support Jim Jordan for Speaker. There was a move yesterday to say that Trump ought to be the Speaker of the House. Well, I mean, that's a good idea in some fundamental ways. And Trump would be prominent in that position. He'd have to get the votes, though. That's the difficulty, is that this requires a vote of the House to choose the Speaker. And the party in the majority, usually if they vote in unison, can determine that however the party decides. But right now you've got a split party in the GOP. Clearly, the group that ousted Kevin McCarthy, Matt Gaetz, and the like, are a group of really solid conservatives, the Freedom Caucus within the House. But the GOP itself in the House is largely uniparty. I mean, it really is aligned to a large extent. If you watched any of the debate, it was kind of shocking to see how many of the House members really just supported Kevin McCarthy outright. And Kevin McCarthy has conceded to the Democrats almost consistently, going along with what they want and then browbeating the GOP to come along as well. Now, there have been some battles that have been won, but the truth is the Congress right now is dysfunctional. It's completely in disarray. The country is dysfunctional right now. We're a divided country, extremely divided, and the nature of our internal politics is very increasingly hateful. I mean, the left is intolerant, wants to censor anyone who disagrees with them in this woke nonsense, which has dominated the political correctness of the universities and the mainstream media. Increasingly, I think the intelligence agencies control the mainstream media and are putting out a message that is a globalist message. I'm not even sure the intelligence agencies believe in the Constitution any longer. And certainly the Democratic Party is hateful of much of America, having been indoctrinated with this woke agenda that we're a racist nation and that our Constitution was written by slaveholders to preserve their rights to hold slaves. I mean, this is all going back over history, which is a destructive Marxist technique, tearing down statues, destroying and vilifying the history of a nation. This is part of the Gramsci cultural revolution that we're going through. In other words, communism failed in its original concept that the workers of the world would rise against capitalism. And we're seeing indications of that now with labor unions like the UAW, which is in strike, but it's supporting the workers not getting displaced by this insane move to go to electric vehicles, which the grid cannot handle. And what Jordan faces is he's going to be perceived as clearly aligned with Gaetz. And there's going to be a reaction among the GOP to punish Gaetz for having ousted McCarthy. Now, this is, again, not good news for Donald Trump or the conservative movement, the MAGA movement. I think the MAGA movement is solidly committed to Trump. I don't think there's any way the core MAGA movement gets dislodged. But I think that the disruptive force that I think is coming is the independent candidacy of Robert Kennedy Jr. He's going to draw a lot of votes, I believe, from Biden. He may draw some from Trump, although it would be an incredible combination to have Trump as the presidential candidate and Robert Kennedy Jr. as the vice presidential candidate. I think they might even win as independents. And I don't know that Trump will consider that. Trump is going to attend this caucus on Tuesday of the GOP, in which they're going to try to debate amongst each other as to who ought to be the speaker. That ought to be a very interesting meeting. It's closed doors. It'd be an interesting meeting to watch, because I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of screaming and shouting and finger pointing. The House members in the GOP who wanted to keep McCarthy are angry. Nancy Pelosi was especially angry to get thrown out of her hideaway office, and she had some very, very harsh things to say, which we're not going to repeat. You could search them on the internet, but she was extremely critical and kind of unleashed yesterday, losing her office. So the Congress is in disarray, and we've only got 40 days until we face again the government shutdown, and that's coming quickly. And we're on the edge, I think, of seeing a massive upheaval within Congress, which just can't pass a budget. They can spend, but they can't pass a budget. They can't contain spending. Now, a couple more things I want to talk about. Let Chris talk in a second and get his views on this. It's nice to have a dialogue on some of these subjects. But the point I'm seeing is there's a lot of articles being written now about the fact that we're also in kind of an economic crisis that's developing. I've seen a lot of criticism of Chairman Powell, who is the head of the Federal Reserve, because he's a lawyer, he's not an economist. And there's a lot of economists saying that the money supply, which is the M2, which is measured by the Fed, is declining. We're having a lot less lending. The balances in bank accounts are going down. And these are usually signs of economic contraction. But the Federal Reserve, since Greenspan, has abandoned monetary policy. That's largely Milton Friedman. And they've gone to follow the policy of interest rates, the price of money, how much it costs to get loans, rather than follow the money supply. Now, Milton Friedman, I think, was right in a lot of ways. And there's debates as to whether he's right when there is low inflation or whether he's right when there's high inflation. I think the money supply is a fundamental issue in terms of economic expansion and contraction. When the money supply contracts, the economy is beginning to contract. That's usually the sign of a recession coming. And essentially, I think that globally, we've already got a recession in Europe, especially in Germany, which has been deindustrializing given the price of energy. And we're finding that internationally, this green energy policy is simply itself not sustainable. You can't, is the government going to come in and say your home is racist, so therefore you're taking your home? Well, in effect, they demand that go to all power in the house being generated by green energy machines. So you can't have a natural gas water heater or natural gas heater for the home, and centralized heating or centralized cooling. Well, these will be cost enormous amounts of money, so maybe $100,000 for a household to convert. It will also raise rates. But the left is determined to destroy capitalism, as we pointed out in one deep dive interview this week, or deep dive discussion, that the whole agenda of the woke is neo-Marxist, and it is a way to create an existential threat around climate such that we quit using hydrocarbon fuels, and ultimately millions of people die, because fundamentally it's an anti-human movement with depopulation at its core. Now, the insanity, I think we're going through an age of fundamental anarchy. And I look around and I see everywhere I'm looking, I see complete disarray. The cities are deteriorating with the number of migrants. They smash and grab attacks in the cities. It's hard to have a retail store when the police can't protect you. We have a prominent congressman who was carjacked. Various members of Congress are sleeping in their offices because it's unsafe to walk home at night in D.C. These are conditions which are dystopian. At the same time I was watching last night, I like to watch the Proms in London, which is a music festival that they put on TV to some extent in the Royal Albert Hall. Last night they had the Great Britain Youth Chorus, the Youth Orchestra, Symphony Orchestra, incredibly filled stage of young musicians. They did a brilliant concert. I especially like when they played the Copland Third Symphony, which includes in the end, fanfare to the common man. There's great goodness as well on earth. These kids were enjoying themselves. They were performing. They were all well trained, well disciplined. They weren't smashing the streets like Antifa. They weren't wildly out of control with random violence in the streets. We're at a tipping point in the earth right now between good and evil. And it is a contest which I think has been more sharply in focus today than ever in my lifetime. And Chris, and I want to show this book. Please do, with all the economic turmoil, get a copy of the book I've written here on the turmoil. I'm predicting there's going to be a global crash. I think it's in the works. I think it'll happen. I think it's beginning to happen. I see it watching the bond market. The bond market prices are going up. Bond market is less attractive. That's a good sign too. This book is a good sign of a recession. By the way, how the coming global crash will create an historic gold rush. You can get it free by calling Swiss America, and the number is 1-800-519-6268. I'm going to repeat that for people listening in audio only. I get a free copy of the book by calling Swiss America. I co-authored it with Dean Heskin, who's the CEO at Swiss America, which is a company I worked with for 20 years, specializing in precious metals. The number is 1-800-519-6268. 1-800-519-6268. Get your free copy. Chris, you want to comment?
On the whole issue with the Speaker of the House, wouldn't it be better maybe just to think about this? And I know the votes aren't going to be there, to bring in a third party, somebody who's not necessarily affiliated with either of the representatives or something like that. Somebody who is outside of the idea of having to represent one section of the country as Speaker of the House. Wouldn't that be an interesting idea?
Yeah, the problem is, who are you going to find?
The other problem is it's an unelected official who would be third in line to the presidency. That's another problem.
And also someone who probably does not know the rules of the House. I mean, one of the things that would be an impediment to Trump, I would think, if he thinks seriously about the office, is that the Speaker of the House is required to be a master of parliamentary procedure, the way the House implements it.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
And it's very complicated. I mean, Trump is not going to put up with all the things you have to go through to put a bill on the floor, or to shepherd legislation through, or to block things. I mean, the House of Representatives is the largest of our two bodies of government. It represents the districts rather than the state as a whole. And it's like trying to, herd cats. They're constantly dealing with about 400 people, each of whom has their own idea of what they want to do. And you're trying to move the country in some kind of a direction, but you've got to follow parliamentary procedure to accomplish that task. And a lot of things, it's just like I tell people about, you're going to be a lawyer. The law is what the law says it is. It's not what you think it is. And that's fundamental in first-year law school. The law is what it says it is. It's not common sense. Well, running the House of Representatives is not common sense either. And the other point I'd make, Chris, and what you said, which, it's a noble thought, but today, with everything so divided, I think any individual is going to be identified with one camp or another. I don't think you can find a truly person who's in the middle. I think the country is center right. I think the universities and the media are woke left.
Yeah.
Now, how do you bridge that gap? That's the question. I don't think you can.
And the media knows how to take that far left message and make it mainstream, because they just pound it into your head. It's like wearing people down until they finally say, "Okay, we'll give it to you."
Well, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm good. I did want to say though, another thing about the next speaker, and guys like Gates and the rest of them have to realize this: no matter who you put in, you're still not going to get everything you want, because we still have a very slim majority, and you still have a Senate which is slimly leaning left. Okay, that's another issue. So when you put somebody in there, there is going to be some serious disappointment. There may have to be some deals made, but at least if the procedure, let's say, Gates is 100% right. You can't sit there. 3 men in a room can't sit there and hash out a big budget, throw it in front of representatives and senators for 2 3 days, and tell them, here's 900 pages. You go read that and then vote on it. No one's going to do that. They're not going to know what's in it.
The government's gotten unmanageable. It's too big. It's the too many bureaus, the agencies who are running things their own way, making laws. The budget is impossible. It's simply huge and unmanageable. And there's things in the budget that nobody understands, and there's a lot of money being stolen in the massive corruption. Let's go to the second story here. The Biden is now going to build a border wall. Well, isn't that nice? I mean, after he's let immigration come in like crazy. First of all, I favor immigration. I think it's good for the country. I'm like Julian Simon. I think we have a real need to get into a better structure for managing the entire immigration issue. I want it to be legal. I want it to be robust. I think the Spanish coming into the United States are possibly going to revitalize the country, and they do still believe in God. So I think we're into a situation where it would be very nice and very, favorable if we could just manage to have an orderly process of getting things done in the country where we are going forward with immigration. As it is, Biden building a wall is almost a laugher, because he opposed the wall so much and has done nothing except open the border. And in fact, his constituency is going to, the woke left is going to be up in arms over this. But the problem is you've got New York City Mayor Eric Adams and other Democrats who are trying to run these cities, which are becoming Democratic hellholes. Mayor Adams for New York is on a trip to Mexico, Colombia, and Ecuador to tell would-be migrants that New York City cannot accommodate them after the local shelter systems have been overwhelmed. About 11 million immigrants in the United States without legal documentation. That's according to the Washington-based Migration Policy Institute. But the problem is, I think there's probably twice that number easily. There could be as many as 30 million Hispanics in the United States, which is I think, again, in general, a positive move for the country. I think we need to get the immigration as long as it's legal. Now, Biden is not going to get a comprehensive immigration reform bill passed in Congress because he's not going to have serious enough provisions in it that will satisfy the GOP. And the idea, build that wall was one of the major campaign points of Donald Trump in 2016. Now Biden's going to build a wall. He's going to build a wall largely with some movable components, and it's needed, but it's not going to stop the problem. It's not going to stop the flow. I was in New York City this week. Roosevelt Hotel, which used to be a beautiful hotel in the 30s when it was built. It was an old hotel. It is an old hotel. Now it's being used entirely for immigrants. New York City's putting them immigrants into hotels because and paying for that. The cities are going to go bankrupt this way. It's like the Collard Piven theory. We cannot handle these types of expenses, and there's no way to contain them. Because what are you going to do? What we should be doing with these people is getting them work permits. And again, it's not a fair system when many people have worked for years to come into the country legally, spend thousands of dollars to do so, and the people who just walk across the border are having to be accommodated. My basic feeling about this is that we're seeing a Collard Piven destruction of America. And what I've objected to with immigration is its manipulation by the neo-communist movement to destroy America. These people are brought here and they're dumped here. They aren't cared for. And the Democrats don't really care for them. They care to bring them into the country in order to enact a fundamental communist understanding, and that is a change in demographics is a change in politics. So you change the demographics of a country, and the demographics of the world are changing massively right now. There's also huge amounts of immigration coming into Europe from the Middle East, countries like Syria, and the fighting that's been going on in the Middle East, our war in Afghanistan. You've got Ukrainian people fleeing the war in Ukraine. Got massive numbers of people coming across the Mediterranean boats from Africa. And Italian cities are also getting overwhelmed with immigrants and changing the culture. So too with Islam in countries like France and others, which are not assimilating. They are basically operating in their own little enclaves. And the cultural change of Europe is, in a sense, going to be the loss of the traditional European culture, just as we're going to lose the traditional American culture if we don't reinforce American values, if we don't get back to God. The Hispanics will believe in God and do believe in God and have not yet been indoctrinated woke. It's one of the major reasons I'm in favor of supporting this Hispanic population and assimilating them into the United States in a way where they will restore the traditional values, which is what they came here to experience. Now, if our cities remain unsafe, if we continue to engage in this anarchy and chaos, we're not headed in a positive direction. Chris, you want to comment on that?
Another funny thing about this idea is supposedly, and this is what a couple of reporters were saying in the press briefing, where Karine Jean-Pierre was trying to fend off loads of questions from reporters about this subject, about the border wall. The idea was, hey, Biden could do this. Couldn't Biden install this? Mayorkas said, well, we do need some kind of barrier. That's what I heard. I haven't really read any reports myself on that. By the way, neither had Pierre or Jean-Pierre. But the idea is one reporter was saying that may have happened. So it looks like, and this is from my perspective, it looks like the Biden administration, the DHS, really believes we need a border wall, but they don't want to. They don't want to admit it. And conveniently, the money was set back in 2019 to do so they can wash their hands of responsibility, but still claim that they're protecting the border at the same time. How about that? And there was a fun exchange between her and Karine Jean-Pierre and Peter Doocy. I have that if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, let's hear that. Play that for a minute. That's a good one.
We're going to get to that right now. There were a load of questions. It wasn't just this particular set, but this was the funny one. I have to say, I sometimes think these two are flirting every time they kind of go back and forth. But here it is.
Thank you, Karine. Thank you, Karine. As a candidate, President Biden didn't say there will not be another foot of wall constructed that except what was appropriated in 2019. He said there will not be another foot of wall constructed in my administration. So something changed. What?
You want us to break the law? Is that what you want? You want us to not comply with the law?
I'm not.
But you want us to not comply with the law. You want us to not be in administrations that follow the rule of law.
You guys do this all the time. The student loan forgiveness program, you went to court to fight for that. If this is such a problem, building 20 miles of wall, why not just go to court?
We went to Congress. The Congress appropriates the funding.
Why not
Congress appropriates the funding. We asked them to not use that funding for that particular purpose. They denied it, and now we're complying with the law.
If you have to build a border wall, but you don't think that it's going to work, then once it's done, are you just going to tear it down?
I'm not getting into hypotheticals from here. I'm just telling you what I can tell you from here. The facts are that DHS is complying with the law. This is from this was under fiscal year 2019 under Republican leadership, and DHS is required to do this. The president asked multiple times of Congress to reappropriate. They did not, and we're not complying by the law. Thanks, everybody.
She hightailed it out of there.
Yeah, well, again, it's part of the dysfunction in Washington. I mean, the Biden administration does whatever it wants to do, follows the rules when it wants to, and it ignores the rules when it wants to. Clearly, Biden's corruption and the money that his family's taking from Ukraine and China and every other crooked oligarch in the world, he's not following any rules there except his own.
And he could have done this. He could have gone to the courts. He could have found some kind of sympathetic lefty judge to stop this from happening. Well, the fact is he didn't. I believe he's going to try to take credit for an improved situation as the wall goes up.
Well, he probably will. I mean, it clearly indicates that the Biden administration realizes there's a political problem here, and the country is getting tired of seeing the cities become unsafe. And they've got to do something about it because an election's coming up. As much as they might want to cheat in an election, you might not be able to cheat with the magnitude of people who are upset at the Biden administration. Let's move on. I want to cover a couple more stories in the time we've got. I want to cover two stories on the climate issue. There's a lot going on in the climate issue right now. And I think what's happening is that we're finding that the governments of the world are realizing this woke agenda, this green agenda, is predicated on junk science and doesn't work. So the UAE, which is United Arab Emirates, which is one of the Middle Eastern largest nuclear powered countries, they are going to increase their nuclear power capacity, and they've signed agreements with China to help them do so. Now, the Middle East region is also, developing nuclear energy when the Middle East has gotten plenty of oil is extremely interesting to me, because this is really the future if you want to survive and have a thriving industrial state go worldwide. Poorer countries could follow a combination of hydrocarbon fuels and nuclear energy, and you could provide in Africa or throughout Asia readily available, relatively cheap energy. Now, the reason for that is that when there's abundant, cheap energy, you can build an economy. Now, it also takes a culture. You've also got to have a culture in which kids are raised, like those kids I'm talking about in the Great Britain's National Youth Orchestra, who were raised correctly. Their parents, mother and father, taught values, made to learn disciplines, to play at that level in an orchestra at their age, which is 16, 17 years old, teenagers, is remarkable. And I'm pleased to see that there are kids still going through that discipline. I'm sure there's millions worldwide and millions who aspire to do that. But they've got to have the family structures, you've got to have the educational structures, and it's fundamental to have readily available, cheap energy. It's also fundamental to have available law enforcement. When the majority of the country is not following the law, when the majority of the government is making it up, deciding, well, we're going to follow, the appropriations from Trump in 2019, and we're required to build a wall. Well, that hasn't stopped Biden. He didn't campaign on that. He knew what the law was when he was campaigning. He campaigned on he was going to not follow that law. He didn't change the law. Now he's going to comply with it because of the need politically. With the country in disarray, I do want to remind people, if you go back historically, the country's been in disarray before. The presidential elections, if you study them in the early republic, when Thomas Jefferson was fighting everybody and the Adams were trying to establish their position, they were very rancorous, and Congress was extremely divided. A lot of screaming and shouting has not been unusual in the history of American congressional politics. We have had difficult times during the Depression. Each of the two world wars were hotly debated before they were entered, and possibly we shouldn't have entered them. That's another whole debate. But the point is, we are constantly in disarray, and its question is whether the forces of good or the forces of evil are going to win. And right now, that balance is in question. That's the point I'm making. But what I see, the UAE, which, taking several Gulf states, so in the Middle East and North Africa, several Gulf states are considering planning or starting nuclear power programs, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, Yemen, Israel, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, and Sudan. The nuclear energy industry in the Middle East is expanding, but it's still in the early stages, with the International Atomic Energy Agency helping several countries across the region to develop nuclear programs. This, I think, is the future. You had countries like Germany, which shut down their nuclear power plants on a woke agenda, which is insanity. Now, the other story I thought also was extremely important today was that Exxon is, Wall Street Journal is reporting, is days away from buying this giant shale company in a seismic deal that's going to reshape U.S. energy. So Exxon, which, by the way, made a lot of profit, a lot of money in the pandemic and subsequently, when when the price of oil got up to $127 a barrel, and they are reinvesting that money. They first of all did some stock buyback. They did a lot of dividends, and now they're going to try to get into this company that has a major stake in the Permian oil, shale oil, which is a huge formation in the United States of shale that can be quickly made productive. It doesn't take drilling and years of infrastructure. The shale oil can be converted into petroleum very quickly. But this company, Pioneer, has a lot of acreage in the Midland Basin, which is the eastern portion of the Permian Basin. I've been writing about the Permian Basin for years. It includes West Texas and New Mexico, one of the largest collections of fertile oil in the United States. And this company they're buying, Pioneer, holds one of the largest number of untapped drilling locations of any Permian player. Okay, so now this whole Permian Basin, which is oil, shale oil, and oil, is ripe for being developed. And what is interesting about this is that the bottom line, Exxon's move to purchase Pioneer, even after the acquisition of Dearberry, the carbon dioxide pipeline operator, signals the company is still primarily planning to lean on its traditional oil and gas business for decades. Now, this move to go into ESG, or to say that Exxon's going to invest something like $1.7 billion in green energy, essentially means that Exxon has understood that they're going to have to do some virtue signaling. They're going to have to say, well, we're not opposed to the green agenda. But when you look at their economic decisions, Exxon is saying that they're going to invest $17 billion through 2027 in cutting the company's carbon emissions and building a business that would offer companies to help to reduce their carbon emissions too, including carbon capture, biofuels, lithium mining. Okay, all that's virtue signaling. They're going to do some of that. It will happen. But their major business is going to remain oil and natural gas. And they will probably move to be the leading U.S. company, because the recognition is that we're not moving off. We're not doing this sustainable switch anytime near soon. I pulled out of my library a book that I consider to be one of the better ones on climate. And this one right here. It's called Green Murder. It's by Ian Plimer, Plimer. And the subtitle of the book is A Life Sentence of Net Zero with No Parole, Green Murder. And I'm going to read you part of his introduction. He said, he is a scientist who I believe is in New Zealand. I've read a lot of his books. I have a lot of his books in my library, but he is quite brilliant. And here's what he writes in the introduction. If green activism achieves its aim, the third world will remain in poverty. Western countries will become impoverished and ever more reliant on China, which uses climate change as a weapon against the West. Now, that's about as succinct a sentence as you can write that captures truth. And it reflects what I say in my book, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change. I cite Plimer a lot in my book. To continue, many green leaders have unhealthy obsession with death, killing, catastrophes, totalitarianism, and the restriction of freedom. That's the basic point. The environmental movement has been captured by this death climate cult. And they are Marxist. They are neo-Maoists. They want to run a cultural revolution. Green leaders, I'm continuing, green leaders are anti-environmental, hypocritical, and fraudulent, and use green policies to make money for woke businesses and China. If green activists were actually concerned about their fellow humans and the environment, they would support cheap, reliable, 24/7 fossil fuel and nuclear generated electricity. That's my whole point. Over the last 50 years, global per capita GDP, longevity, health, cropland productivity, and forests have increased due to technology, use of fossil fuels, and a slight increase in plant food for the air. That's increased with the increase due to technology. Okay, maybe that sentence again. So over the past 50 years, global per capita GDP, longevity, health, crop, land productivity, and forests have increased due to technology, use of fossil fuels, and a slight increase in plant food in the air. We're now feeding more people from less land. Global pollution has decreased. The planet is improving. Wealth has solved environmental problems, not greens. Coal brought people out of grinding poverty and misery in the Industrial Revolution, and later hundreds of millions of Chinese out of crippling poverty. Policies of green activists attempt to reverse these gains. It has never been shown that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. Notwithstanding, Australia sequesters more carbon dioxide than it emits. He's possibly from Australia. It's one of the countries in that region. If green activists or school children on strike are to be taken seriously, they should demonstrate in Tiananmen Square against the world's biggest emitter of carbon dioxide and should give up the use of all electronic equipment. Mining and export of coal, iron, uranium, and other minerals keeps Australia solvent. If green activists want to maintain a society that supports Social Security, subsidies, and green schemes, they must be loud public supporters of mining and emission-free nuclear power. Otherwise, they are hypocrites. Australia has 24 coal-powered stations compared to the planned and existing plants in China, 3,543, India, 1,036, and the EU, 495. Cultural advances one coal-powered station at a time. That's important. Closing Australian power stations will have no effect whatever on global carbon dioxide emissions. The long march of the left through the schools and universities, that's Gramsci, the long march through the institutions, has produced green activists in a generation that cannot write, read, calculate, think, and solve problems and look after themselves. They have no knowledge of the past, Western civilization, science, critical thinking, and the brutalities of previous communist and socialist regimes. While green activists, politicians, and celebrities live in caves as sustainable hunter-gatherers, we may seek their advice. While they travel around the world in private jets to chastise us for our emissions of carbon dioxide, they are hypocrites. That's the truth. And it's not truth that the mainstream media wants to hear. If you like the show, please support our sponsors. People are saying I'm 77 years old. People are saying I'm looking younger. My hair's colors come back. Look at the Carbon 60, the My Vital C. And I've written a book on this, which we're going to start publicizing here in the near future. Live longer and better. It's possible. Carbon 60 is a remarkable molecule. It was discovered about 40 years ago. It's a molecule that has 60 atoms of carbon in a cage structure around a nucleus. It resembles a geodesic dome. It's why these are called fullerenes, geodesic, after Buckminster Fuller. And they're remarkable molecules. They come in many different numbers of atomic of atoms around the nucleus. Some of them are nanotubes. Graphene is formed from one of the carbon 60 molecules, which is harder than steel. It also conducts electricity. Products for hair, products for animals, products for your skin. This is a great company, and it was founded by Chris Burries, who's my co-author, and his partner. They were with the original scientists who won a Nobel Prize about 40 years ago for discovering carbon 60. If you like us, please share the program. We are on many different channels. Please spread the word. We're going to be doing more marketing, and I'm back into introducing telemedicine companies. I'll be telling you about those in the next few weeks. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Today is Friday. It's October 6th, 2023. We'll be back on Monday. We're doing podcasts on The Truth Central, thetruthcentral.com, every weekday. As difficult as the situation is, I believe, and I know for a fact, God always wins. God will win here too. I encourage us that the solution for us is to get on our knees and implore God to forgive us, in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, for having taken God out of our hearts, out of the schools, out of the public squares. We need to restore God. God rules, and he can unplug this place any day he chooses. He can unplug us any day he chooses. And what 2 Chronicles 7:14 says is, if we do beg God's forgiveness for killing millions of babies in the womb, supporting these insane causes, calling abortion a woman's choice, God will hear our prayer and he'll heal our land. And we, I think, do need God's intervention here, and we need to implore it, because we're fighting a spiritual battle. And these are principalities of evil that we're contesting with. And they lie. And they lie very convincingly. In the end, they'll lose. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back on Monday. God bless.